in the back there. Cool. All right. Welcome back to the Keen Light Podcast, the premier whiskey podcast, now with the mention of whiskey in its title. Hey, this is Jake coming live from Warehouse Liquors, downtown Chicago, Illinois. If you haven't been here, come here. As you can tell, I have no Scotsman with me, no Puerto Rican with me, no Mexican with me. Yeah, he's kind of the same all in one. But I do have two friends of the podcast who have both been on. Zach's like, who is he talking about? Wilson Ramon Torres is not with us. He's live, but not with us right now. We are down here to do a new type of podcast, a little rotation of what we go off of on the usual route of recording whiskey, beer, and other sorts of conversation around the spirits industry. And we're going to do a little bit of a roundtable, kind of a new series. We're going to start with Zak Rye of Warehouse Liquor and Eric Rosentreter of the Old Elk Distillery. Welcome, guys. Eric,
Thanks.
if you'd like to introduce yourself first into what you do on a daily basis for Old Elk, and then we'll get into Zach and lead into some conversation.
Sure. So I technically market manager for Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and Wisconsin. So yeah, I do a lot, whether it's advocacy, distribution management, a lot of stuff like that. Basically just running around trying to sell my whiskey and trying not to burn out. And yeah, having a good time with it, man.
Those are life goals to have. Don't
It
burn
is.
out.
I was finding that work-life balance. Luckily, my brand really respects that. So, when it comes down to like doing events on Saturdays, it's like, well, okay, maybe don't work so hard on Mondays sort of stuff. Because I think that's having that balance and those boundaries is important. But yeah, just responding, selling single barrels whenever we can. As a non-allocated single barrel producer, it's challenging to keep up with because there's 40 people working for my brand nationwide. So our marketing team is a woman named Sarah,
Nice.
for example. So
Hello, Sarah.
it's one of those things that like small and mighty, love smaller brands. I love smaller business structures and stuff like that. It's more adventuresome and challenging. And you tend to learn more if you're ready to.
Well, also, thank you for getting your master distiller of Mr. Greg Metz onto the podcast as well.
Oh, that was a
couple
great
months ago.
episode.
He's a sweetheart.
It's a good callback and a good episode. Hanging out with Greg. I was actually in the car with him that week, driving him to his hotel, and like a thought occurred to me. I'm like, holy shit! I've got Greg Metz in my car right now. You can tell he's just an educator to the core. Probably a lot of that from his Seagram's training and his true apprenticeship that he did there through Seagram's MGP and everybody else that owned it while he was there. And he's just such a simple person.
Yeah.
It's so matter of fact what he says. People believe because of that confidence and that assured stance that he has. Get him a Coors Light and a cheeseburger after a long day's of work. He'll be happy.
Yeah, he's so down to earth. I love
Very
it.
much so.
Yeah,
It's
he's a
refreshing.
great
I think that makes all of us happy, that combination right there.
Sure, it's rarefied air, not only with who he is and what he's done, but his general approachability to it. You see other people that have been in similar positions for such a long time, and to be able to appropriately shine a spotlight or help shine a spotlight onto him and all that he's achieved and all that he has done is, honestly, it's kind of my, like, kind of soft-spoken, like very much a career highlight. Like to be able to talk with him on the phone and stuff like that and pick his brain when needed is
100%.
To have access to that sort of brain is it's amazing.
He's a guy who's been distilling for 40 years,
Yeah.
and he's still hesitant to call himself a master distiller. When people that have been working the eighth of the time that he has, like, I'm a master distiller. Like, oh,
Yeah, and,
cool.
and part of our company mantra is just quiet on purpose. As we know, whiskey, and especially American whiskey, has become very noisy over the last 10 to 20 years or so. And to have that as like kind of our hallmark is really cool. I mean, there's a lot of pressure to succeed that we all know and that we all deal with on every day, whatever we do. But to be like, it's okay not to add noise to our arena.
Yeah.
And just put your head down and go and find success where you can.
I wrote a new mantra today in my notebook before I came here. Prosperity and unity. I don't know where it came from, but
You probably saw it on TV.
I think that's
sure.
the unreleased.
actually, I know I'm just lying. I know where I got it from.
It sounds like an unreleased Operation Ivy 7-inch.
I stole it from Fulham SC's new brand video to introduce their home kits for the 2023-2024 season.
Was that a plug?
No, I'm an
It's
Everton
Fulham
fan.
FC. You might get a handwritten letter from Fulham FC thanking you for the call out.
You know what? London pride, baby. We're huge in Great Britain. Huge in Great Britain. We did a lot of German downloads this week out of the blue. I was just checking that every once in a while, and it's like Germany, Germany, Germany.
Huh.
That's
Okay.
just your looks.
It's probably just some tourists from America that listened to the podcast and downloaded it over in Germany on vacation.
That could be.
Yeah,
Nobody goes to Germany on vacation.
I have.
On accident?
No, it was like 10 years ago, though.
Yeah. I ended up in Frankfurt once. I wasn't a fan.
I enjoyed my time over there. Well, Zach, please introduce yourself. I know you were on the podcast a few months ago, but yeah.
I get the full thing. So my name is Zak Rye, R-Y-E, unfortunately. Also not a fan of rye.
This guy.
But yeah, I work for Warehouse Liquors. I run the tasting room upstairs. And I don't know, like Jack, what is it? Master of something, master of none?
Mm-hmm.
Jack of all trades,
Master of none, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this roundtable thing is going to be really cool because once Callum gets here, I think we can do like, it's just like, this is all sides of the industry right now. Eric, you have worked off premise with me.
Yeah.
I do want to grill you at some point about working for Craft Brand. Did you wear the Old Elk shirt on accident? Was that the first thing that you...
I just grabbed it. I figured why not?
Mm-hmm.
Give it a shout out.
While on camera, why not?
It's a T-shirt. It's Friday. I didn't come full brand blazing. Yeah.
I was like, do I have a Star Wars T-shirt on? Ours is so nondescript.
I
with stars.
almost-
I really wish you did, yeah.
I almost rocked the deep V, but went against it.
Well,
Ooh.
I
wish
want to
you
talk
did.
to both
just
of you
for
guys
create
about
sex appeal.
craft distilleries
Oh,
and,
sure.
and the
Beautiful.
concept of working with craft distilleries. That's like, I'm very interested in that. As far as like some of my points on this, one thing, again, like I mentioned, Eric and I have worked here together for quite some time. And
It was fun and insanely stressful.
it was fun
It was
for
the
me,
pandemic.
but it was
the height.
stressful for you.
Yeah, it was the height of the pandemic.
Never heard
But
of
we talked a long time ago about bringing this up on a podcast or something that we would maybe do together. He's been at the house at my home bar, and we've done different things. That sounded
yeah,
weird.
the charity event, that virtual tasting.
Yeah, we
that
did
was
a virtual
fun. Yeah.
tasting. Yeah, it sounded weird, and I said we did different things.
Banana.
Short tangent. Have you noticed that virtual tastings are kind of back again with some brands?
Are they?
Yeah, I think I've seen at least half a dozen advertised in the last 10 days, including my own company. I didn't do it. I told them I'm
Sure.
done. I'm done with those.
The,
but
I think there's
would
a
have
place
never
for
done
it
Yeah.
still. I think now that we know how to do those things and accomplish those, I think like, especially in colder months when people aren't traveling or stuff like that, or people are looking to do like corporate morale building, sort of stuff. I mean, I did those with the Beer Temple guys for over a year.
Yeah.
What one
And
did
like
we do?
Intel, Google, Oracle, and stuff like that were like big corporate clients of ours. I see that kind of being around.
yeah, I mean,
It's not,
it makes
it's not
sense.
every day, all day, thankfully, because that was mentally challenging in its own way. But yeah,
What one did we do?
it was
Beer
for
Temple?
it was for a museum. I forget which one because I mean it seems like 10 years ago.
I wouldn't have done it if you wouldn't have.
It was.
been
It's
there
it's
because-
weird. It's a
yeah.
bit of a mental yoga. And Jake, you're way light years ahead of most people when it comes to this. Not only hosting, but the logistics that come with it, and that hellscape of tiny bottles everywhere in your house.
I still have 1,000 in my storage and unused.
Yeah.
It's
Me
a
too.
bit of a mental yoga, and this is something I do from events too. Is like when doing a tasting. Obviously you want to talk about whatever you're talking about, but like I learned very quickly never to ask people what they're tasting because
Yeah.
that's when things go off the rails,
Yeah.
and that's when everybody has something to say, and it's just like, oh man, it's an easy way to lose the room.
It's why I like having Minnie being the other bartender because I'll do the presentation on whatever we're tasting that night, and she pours.
Yeah.
And every single time I say I don't like to talk about flavor that much. I don't want to tell you what to taste.
Right.
If if you like it, you're right, and if you don't like it, you're right. But if you want
Right.
to talk about flavor afterwards, ask Minnie. because I don't want to be in a position where I'm like, yeah, totally, I get apricot too. I don't want to be that person.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, bringing it back to Greg, that's one of the more fascinating things about tasting with him.
Right.
Is that he's a chemical engineer. He graduated University of Cincinnati with that. So he doesn't swirl and furrow the brows and romanticize what he's tasting. He'll go through the components of things and analyze it. You can see him analyzing it. And be like, that's good whiskey.
I've told people multiple times, and I'm pretty sure I said it on this podcast multiple times, ever since drinking whiskey with him, I now approach whiskey completely differently.
Yeah.
That's
He doesn't exude that. He doesn't try to get people to look at whiskey that way. It's an effect that he's had on people for sure.
Yeah, he's looking
when
for
I was
the
doing virtual
imperfections in the whiskey more than anything, it seems like, analyzing it in that sense.
I think we all do that.
I think smaller brands, independent retailers for sure, could benefit from.
Great segue.
How I viewed it through the beer temple and how we approached it. I mean, it was like, for one, it was 200 ml bottles, so there's only certain brands that you can get access to that whiskey with. So it was like Elijah Craig, Maker's Mark, Roulette Rye. Shout out to Dave Schmier. And it was just, and some other things. It was just whatever else we could get, and basically I broke it down to a category analysis. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't tell people what they're tasting, but hey, this is going to be a wheated bourbon with Maker's Mark. So here's what you can expect from these grains. And basically, when people come into a store, especially like Warehouse, you can see that, and I had it all the time at Delilah's too, that people would come in and they would see this imposing thing in front of them. Very good looking, but this imposing.
Like you mean?
Well,
like good looking, imposing thing?
Depends on my mood. But this imposing amount of selection and choice that they have. And nobody wants to come into a place that's Warehouse Liquors is a sexy room. Delilah's is a sexy room, Franklin room, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they don't want to seem like an idiot. So more often than not, they revert back to either what they think they want, which is maybe an allocated whiskey, or their daily driver in Evan Williams, or fucking Maker's Mark or whatever.
Yeah, instead of maybe trusting the person behind the bar to guide them in the right way.
Sure. And I very much took that when working here. It took a little bit, but to be like welcoming them to the experience.
Well, we talked about that a little bit as far as like a bar or a shop, because we've both worked on premise and off premise, being possibly a little intimidating.
Very much so.
I think Warehouse can be to a lot of people, and I mean
that's part of it.
So that brings us back kind of to like the main thing that we were trying to talk about before. And to be clear, Eric texted me and said, "Hey, do you want to talk some shit?" And I was like, I'll talk some shit.
Hell yeah. I'm here to talk some shit.
And I just thought I was going to get beat up by Eric, like in the back alleyway at Warehouse.
We could still do that after the fact.
I don't really.
That's a Patreon. That's like, the Patreon's going to be like West Side Story.
OnlyFans. That can be our OnlyFans.
OnlyFans,
Boom.
West Side Story style,
Let's
behind
make
Warehouse
some money.
Liquors. Kickoff at about 1:30.
Yeah, something we talked about for a long time. Okay, let's dive into liquor store etiquette.
Do you want to do that, or do you want to talk about small brands for a second? We started there. We
can do both.
I don't care.
Okay.
Which one do you want to do?
Let's do the etiquette, because that's your expertise.
I don't know. I don't know about that. No, because actually, let's go over this, because I want Eric's input on this as well, and yours. Because
I can leave.
I have a lot of questions on working for small brands, because you guys both work for independent, smaller, like craft distilleries.
Very purposefully, yes.
So I have a ton of questions about that.
Sure.
Okay, liquor store etiquette. This is something that, Eric and I have had long conversations about in the past, and it's present every single day that I'm here. Do we just make it easy? How to get what you want?
No, let's make them work for it a little bit.
Just like the customer.
It's honestly, for me, in my experience, and I've worked retail both here and another store that shall not be named for me.
You say it.
Say it.
Say it.
I don't even
No. I'm not going to. I'd rather not.
Is it still open?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Either.
But
Is it in the city?
It's in the city. And that was a long time ago when whiskey was just starting to show rumblings of the success that we're seeing now.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
When I ask Eric who hurt you, I already know the answer.
Me.
It was extremely upsetting to work there.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
I have one of those jobs. I'll talk about that.
I think you should say it. I
mean,
said a bunch of
the-
stuff
I'm
last
of the
time I
opinion
was
that
on
if you don't
this.
want people to say bad things, then don't do bad things.
Yeah.
I've completely subscribed to that mentality.
What does it rhyme with?
Schmesh, schmake, few, schmickers.
Pretty close.
Pretty close, right? Yeah.
Now I know.
Yeah.
But anyway, we deal with this all the time that, like I was saying, people want to come in and for me, it's record shopping. If I'm going record shopping and I go into rec list, if I don't have a list of things that I'm trying to accomplish, I go blank right away and I'm all over the place.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
it's like if you're going into a liquor store, especially if it is a good looking liquor store and you see they've put a ton of energy into building what they're doing, and it could be anything. It could some chains, sure, but mostly independent people have this struggle. And they have the opportunity to get away from shelf sets and be a little more creative with their stores, is get good staff. It's our job to give a shit in everything that we do. So please and thank you. Politeness, abundant politeness. And
From the customer.
from everybody. There's a bit of entitlement going on with whiskey, and I don't see that going away. But a lot of it too, there's a bit of overpreciousness with certain brands from the liquor store's perspective too. That you'll go in there, hey, I heard about this, and especially working with warehouse, be like, oh well, we don't have that, but we have some single barrels.
Yeah,
you
but
know,
we're
that we
lying
would
90% of the time.
well, that we would try people out on. And be like, oh, well, check this out. This is something that we did. And some people wouldn't care, and then they'd leave without their bottles. For me, that's extremely strange. If you go into a liquor store and don't buy something, that's very, very bizarre behavior.
The record
Get a six
store
pack
thing,
of something.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
like,
I get that,
get something.
Yeah, the record store comparison is perfect. It's and
Yeah.
same thing like comic book store.
For
I'd
sure.
make that comparison constantly. And warehouse is like we're the nerdy liquor store.
Sure.
And so if you come in
To the uninitiated, it
you're
can be
pulling
overwhelming.
your phone out, or you're calling your friend who you think they know more about whiskey than they personally do. We're offended, and it's like, wow, I
Right.
could have guided you through like, I mean, one great thing is we don't work on commission, and so
Right.
sometimes if somebody's nice and they're cool, and they pick a bottle out and they really want it, we can totally say like, you don't want that. In fact, let me go into the back and I'll grab you something.
Building that
But-
trust takes
yeah.
time too.
But at the same time, I mean, that's, I think, the first rule that you and I have both experienced, I still experience constantly, is somebody who walks in and goes, well, the classic, you got any Blantons?
Sure.
And how many people listen to this?
1 million.
I don't have any Blantons. There's no Blantons here at all. But yeah, what do you have in the back? What's allocated? What do you have that's rare? That is a direct line to, it's all on the shelf.
Yeah.
How many times does a customer need to come into a store to feel comfortable to ask that question? Because a lot of customers now do know that's the case, that bottles are in the back or they're in a private room somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I don't care how many times you've been in, if you ask me what's in the back, there's nothing in the back. Sodas. There's 2 liter. You want a 2 liter of Diet 7-Up? Like, I'll go grab
Hell
you
yeah.
one. But it's people who come in, they're nice, there's a vibe, you can tell.
Yep.
I have tons, like almost every single one of my regulars, they set up appointments with me to come in, and afterwards I get photos, like either via email or text, of that bottle cracked and their first pour and their thoughts on that bottle.
Right.
And their tasting notes on that bottle. And those are the people that when they come in, they don't ever have to say, oh, anything new, anything in the back. They come in and they go, oh, I got cool stuff for you.
Yeah.
And I go in the back.
Yeah, because you pay attention to what you're doing.
Yeah, but
you
the
know
people who-
people's styles,
The people
how
who come
adventuresome
in-
they are and willing
Yeah.
to try things. Even price comes into it too.
I've got a really, like, one of my favorite regulars. I'll shout him out, James Andrade. I'll let him know that I did
Nice.
that.
Nice.
But he's got a new listener.
He was a cop for a while, and he was like one of the main cops that really helped us out when the lootings and everything were going on. We got hit hard.
Right. He came in
And
like every week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he became a really good customer and just a supporter of the shop. And I know his taste, I know his style, and so in the basement, when I get stuff in that we're not shelving, I shouldn't probably said that either, but whatever.
I think you said it last time too.
I probably did.
I think you also said you were a sucker for when someone comes in and says, it's my dad's
It's
birthday.
birthday.
Yeah.
I just did that. I literally just did that
Okay.
like 3 days ago.
It was the fall of 2020, and I was here by myself on like a Monday or Tuesday or something. And
I think it was a Wednesday.
middle of the day, and these two
Thursday.
guys walked into the shop, independent of each other, but came in roughly the same time. I'm like, hey guys, how you doing today? Greet everybody. Again, going back to good manners.
Yeah.
Because your bad experiences, a previous bad experience, isn't their fault. So walking people in,
That's a very good point.
That's a good point.
and hey, let me know if you have anything. We got some new barrel picks, standard greeting that we would do here. And I go, okay, cool. I'm like, let me know if you have any questions. So they're looking at they go over to the whiskey wall and start looking at their phones. I'm like, okay, I see what's going on here. I'm like,
Yeah.
more often than not, we know how that ends up.
Yeah.
This older, not that gender matters, but this older woman walks in. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Welcome to Warehouse. Let me know if you have any questions about anything. And I was here by myself, so I.
That's weird.
Or I think Armando was still here, but he was in back doing something, hiding in the office.
YouTube's important.
And this person showed me her phone, and was like, "Hey, I'm looking for a gift for my son for
love
Christmas."
that. I love that.
And I've heard you and I have heard this line a million times, and it's just like if she got one past me, if she snuck this past the keeper, then kudos for her because she really really got it. Shows me a picture of Woodford Reserve. I'm like, okay. Awesome. She's like, do you have anything like it? I'm like, okay, I see where this is going. So I grabbed her one of our barrel picks that was very sought after that we had like a couple left of that weren't on the floor.
Was she asking for that barrel pick?
No, not at all.
Just ask.
Yeah,
Show you a
like, I
bottle
want a
of
gift
Woodford.
for my son. I'm like,
Okay.
I do
like,
this
here,
all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
And step over to her with that bottle, and I held it up for her very much so that the two guys standing in front of the shelf saw what I was doing.
I think you told me this before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like really, really buttering the bread on this
Yeah.
one, and held it up. I'm like, hey, this is one of our barrel picks. I think if you just put a bow on this, put it under the tree, I think he'll really enjoy it. Okay, I'm going to continue to shop. Great, I'll put it behind the register whenever you're ready. And let me know if you have any questions about any wines.
Right.
And
Did
you
the
have to
thing.
tell the guys that was reserved for her.
So she came in, or she, eventually made the transaction, bought a bunch of stuff, and one of the guys came over. He's like, "Hey, does the whole like hang dog, shuffling the feet a little bit? I saw that you have that. Do you have any more?" I'm like, "No, man, it's the last one. Sorry, just sold out.
Yep.
Did the thing,
Because they didn't play the game right.
and he left.
Yeah.
And he left
Without buying
And
anything.
without buying anything.
Right.
Not that you have to, but I'm like, all right, cool.
Right.
Yep.
If you would have bought something.
Something
Like a
something.
$40 bottle
engage
of something. Yeah.
Engage me as a person, because we had this thing here that sometimes it's not always about sales; it's about letting people buy. And Gene doesn't mark things up.
Because like if
That's
you're
a
at the
barrel pick.
register and hey man, thanks for buying something. We'll let you know when the next one comes out. Like
Yeah.
Sure,
at least
but
you
various
have right.
independent stores, especially, have their ways of doling out their allocated spirits. Some of which I completely disagree with. We can talk about that if we want. But the other guy came up and he's like, "Hey, I'm looking for a bottle." Does the thing. I'm looking for a bottle. I tasted it out on some of our other barrel picks. He started piling up a couple at the register. I think about like 3 or 4 things.
Nice.
I'm like, you know what, dude? I actually have another bottle of that.
Yep.
Oh,
100%.
really? I'm
That's
like,
how it works.
yeah. I'm like, you're buying some stuff. We had a great conversation. I'm like, you're buying some things with us, very much like how we're talking now.
Right.
And like, he was a younger guy, kind of knew what he was doing, but I'm like, he was at that point of like, he might start to learn the wrong things.
He's probably a regular now.
I would hope so.
I mean, Ben works here because of you.
Yeah.
He
And
went from-
and he like had the best time.
Yeah.
I mean, because just like us, independent liquor stores, like smaller brands, getting my bottle into somebody's hands once doesn't do shit.
Making
It
somebody's
helps.
day.
Making somebody's day, getting
Yeah.
them to come back, or getting them to buy our bottles twice.
Yes.
Now we've got a fan.
Yeah.
And it's such a huge thing for us.
I am a
that doesn't
sucker
really
for
get
the
celebrated.
birthday or like whatever wedding present. I'm totally a sucker for that.
Oh, sure.
I'll
How-
always go grab something.
What percentage
And
do you think people are just like they know that trick and it's not someone's birthday.
Why
You
did
can
you
tell.
Why did you have
I
to
don't
put that
know.
in my head?
I'm going to put it to test after the
you
podcast.
can tell. You can tell. I mean, it's just like when we're working
you
events.
can't.
You can
tell.
You have like 15 seconds maybe to decide and kind of read a person.
Right, because
and
Yeah.
be like, okay, I
if
know
that
what's
mom
going on
comes
here.
in and she's pulling one over on you, then she should be on TV. She should be in movies
Yeah.
if she's acting that
That's
well.
fair. I mean, technically my grandmother has died like 25 times,
Technically.
as far as people know. But your point is to like not taking a bad experience out on the next person, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and you know,
something that we have to
like,
eat,
We
you
don't
know?
have to speak this person's name, but we have worked with that and dealt with that.
Yeah.
But in the on-premise world,
Yeah.
it's the exact same thing.
Sure.
I mean, at Delilah's, did you ever ban somebody, like never again, or maybe they was having a bad night, maybe overserved?
I would. I mean, you had to really screw up. I mean, back in the day when I was there, I mean, it was still that punk rock bar that had a shitload of whiskey.
It still is.
You know, and part of our jobs, especially when I was working the door, was, hey, look out for tattoos, because it was a skinhead punk rock bar, not
Yeah.
like, goose stepping skinheads,
Right.
but like working class skins. And every now and again, somebody, I know, we can go down.
That could be a whole
There were some
podcast
rude
in
boys.
itself.
There were some rude boys and teddy boys in there too,
For
because
sure.
Chicago definitely was Anglophile for the early part of my
The
career.
old romper stompers.
What color
but
were
like-
your laces at the time?
Oh no, I didn't play that game. But we had to watch out for like people's tattoos sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's just like that's what kind of trained me to be like, okay, you get a couple of seconds with this person to figure out what they're about, or at least attempt to, or get some sort of idea. We would tell people to take a break, like, hey, why don't you stay out of here for a little while? I mean, banning somebody, it's ridiculous, but we never had like really bad shit happen to where it'd be like, and if we did, we would call the cops and be like, we don't have to 86 you because you're going to fucking prison.
We don't ban people here. Well, that's not true. On the weekends, we don't ban people here. So a lot of the weekday banned people,
How do they get banned on the weekdays and not the weekends?
I don't think it's a.
Is there a different
no.
crowd that comes in on the weekdays and the weekends?
No.
Is there different people working in those days?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's leave it at that.
Weekends is a lot
All
more
right.
tourists.
Let's
Weekends
do
are a lot more one and done people coming in for festivals.
Weekends are
like, stuff
tourists like
that,
crazy.
for sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
But no, it's people who actually live around.
So how does a
here.
customer get banned in warehouse?
Okay, that I can talk on that actually without getting myself in some form of trouble.
Sounds good. We're on a podcast.
So, if you basically, and Eric's witnessed it as well, the difference is if the staff is able to de-escalate the situation properly and make it not a problem. Like very recently, a guy came in and he was just going crazy and screaming, and that he had gotten banned and he was not happy, and he's like, "I'll never shop here again." Blah blah blah. And I, instead of being like,
that's the idea, buddy.
"Get out of here,"
What prompted him to yell and scream?
the way he was treated on a different day that he was there. I was not there that day. And so I asked him to come outside. I apologized to him. We shook hands. I told him if he wants to come in on the weekends when I'm there, then it's fine. He just, just behave yourself, be cool.
Right.
Don't come in yelling and screaming.
Yeah.
But at this time,
What's he shopping for?
I look over, he usually just gets like pints,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't care. I don't care what anybody buys. If somebody comes in every day and they buy a half pint of Dimitri vodka, like I'm not going to treat them any different from the person who comes in and buys a fifth of Macallan 25. Like
It's a big deal.
Good
Yeah.
point.
And so I
Treating
walked
people that
outside
way
with
is
him,
something I wish more people would do.
and I'm shaking his hand and I'm calming him down, making sure everything's cool. And I look over my shoulder, and Gene is right by the door, and Michael's over by the there's like a garbage can or something over there. And I'm like, wow, they both thought like this was gonna go really south on me, and I didn't think it would. But at the same time, that's the cool part about this shop and like a family-owned independent shop, is that we're such a small staff. We're all so close. We're all such good friends. Gene is basically like my dad, and all the staff, like they're all some of my best friends. And so it was like a weird thing where, Yeah, that guy got banned, and I could tell why. He probably was a little unsavory on an occasion of being in the shop, and he wasn't treated the way that he thought he should be. And he was ejected from the store. Obviously, that's going to piss anybody off, especially if you're not a stable person. And
Right.
Fair way of saying it.
Yeah.
when he came again, that was that. I don't remember how do you get banned? Just acting like an asshole. I don't ban anybody though.
I was going to say, or is it more prone to get banned during special releases and you act like a dickhead?
Nope, it's more prone to get banned depending on the time of day that you come in here.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll leave it at that. You know exactly.
Well, and if you ban people too, you don't give them a chance to, for one, apologize, come correct, maybe do good on whatever mistake happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's a huge thing for me, not only in the service industry, but I think as a society as a whole, is practicing the art of forgiveness and stuff like that, and giving people a chance to rebound from their mistakes or whatever. We're so, especially in the service industry, and it's different from liquor store to bar, but like, don't become so myopic to where you don't let a person maybe prove how good they can be.
Correct. Yeah.
When I was bartending back in the Detroit area, we had people. I mean, it was a dive bar, and it wasn't like a fancy dive bar like Delilah's. It was a dive bar. Like, I poured shots of Jameson and opened PBRs all day. And when we would have to kick somebody out, 9 times out of 10, they would come back day after, a couple days later, totally apologetic, and you give them another shot.
Right? Oh, sure, and not escalating the situation. Like, you talking to this gentleman outside, I did that, I can't even tell you how many times. If somebody's upset, especially if they're intoxicated or unstable, you don't start throwing fire at them. Like, no, you talk to them calmly, get them out of your establishment, and more often than not, it was exactly like you said. They would come back, maybe not the next day, but they would come back and apologize.
Or
and to
you
me,
never
that's
have
good
to
enough.
see them again. I mean,
or you never see them again.
Either way, it usually works out.
Right,
pretty
cool.
fine, as long as you aren't.
And if they
an
come and
asshole about
apologize,
it,
it's just like, cool. Now we have a deeper respect for each other now. Because
Yeah.
thank you for coming back and
I had that
apologizing.
conversation with a friend the
that
other
fucked
day.
up my day.
Yeah, you gotta have guys I think are especially like that. But one of my closest friends, we've been in no physical fights at all, but we've been in we get in 5 serious arguments, and we're mad at each other for a few days, and then we make up. It's why we're good friends. I think it's a thing. You got to get into it a little bit.
Especially coming off of, we're both children of the 80s. We had that toxic masculine, never apologize thing that we grew up around, and I always thought that was kind of bullshit. But yeah.
Something's happening out
Speaking
there.
of garbage cans, I think somebody's emptying the one outside.
I must admit, I broke all these unwritten rules of entering an alcohol store just downstairs this morning. I was on my phone, walking around,
wow.
waiting for you, talking to actually another retailer about distribution.
So you're banned.
It's my last day.
I'll let you down to the front.
It's a different vibe. Every case is different. It's not like a checklist.
I know.
You know what I mean? It's there's that certain quality that certain people have.
We'll talk about this afterwards, but Gene, actually, and this is my fault, I dropped the ball on this. I think it was the wedding, but I'm taking over the Starward concept. So
What does that mean?
that means that you will set up a meeting with me.
Oh, good.
and taste through some
Our
stuff.
founder's coming in town in 10 days.
Okay, it'll be me.
All right, sweet.
That's awesome.
There we
There
go.
we go. Problem solved.
Yeah, I'm a dickhead.
All right, well, actually, that's a solid way to segue into this.
I guess the only thing I would have for customers to know, because a lot of people that listen to this podcast are obviously whiskey drinkers who are customers versus being people inside of the industry.
I don't want people to know all the tricks, kind of.
Okay, well, that's fine.
But that's fine.
I guess
It's part
is
of
the
the
biggest
fun.
answer, well, not the answer, but the most important thing to know is just to come in to a store on a regular basis and just be a nice person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
well,
engage.
Go to your
engage.
local. That if you're looking for whiskey, go to your local that has
Go to
a
your local
developed
Target.
whiskey. Go to
What?
your local that has a developed whiskey program.
I don't think they have
not
whiskey.
introduce yourself, but make yourself known.
Yeah.
Say hey, be friendly. Hey, how's it going today? Like that sort of stuff.
This is the approach I take as a
sure.
brand rep going into a new account, at a bar, like I'll go in, I won't even bring up whiskey or the fact that I'm a whiskey rep unless it comes up naturally in the conversation.
Yeah.
But more times than not, I'll go to the bar, have a drink or two, try to engage with somebody behind the bar, sign my bill, leave a nice tip, and then hopefully they notice that this person is probably a part of our industry in some aspect.
And we talked about that before.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going into an account, like retail's a little different because it's always, if you're in there, they're going to be open. So technically it's always mid-service, but like bars, like maybe introduce yourself, but sit and hang out. Always be complimentary.
Just always reading the room.
When you come into warehouse, it's an experience. Like it really is.
Look at this guy. Well, now that we have some international flair to the podcast, Callum J. O'Donnell has entered the room.
Should we take a pause?
No, we're fine.
Oh, okay, cool. On the fly.
I can just edit it out if we have to, but I think this is a really good conversation. We have a microphone right there for you. If you need to grab a stool, you can. If there's not a stool already there for you.
I'll stand.
All right.
I'm not sure if you're in the shot standing, but...
It also makes me generally uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Does it? Okay, I'll get a stool.
Just crouch. There we go.
Somebody throw this man a stool.
I'll get a stool.
What great segue into what we're about to discuss with this guy here.
The other thing, real quick, before we go into the small brands thing. Oh, you got the host stool, the tall one. You're gonna still make me.
Why not just
uncomfortable.
bring the entire bottle over here, Eric? Gosh, instead of pour yourself one. Talk about hospitality in this place. God.
The record store, like, kind of segue before. I was just having this conversation with my wife and was talking about, like, we don't go buy records anymore because, everything's, streaming. You can just, get it from your phone. But I always would go into small record stores and I would just ask the staff every single time. What are you really into right now? What should I pick up? What's something new and cool that I should check out? And I think that's what, it shouldn't piss us off, but does, is when people come into a retail store, especially like a higher end retail store,
right?
And they're on their phone, they're talking to their friend, like the comment of like showing you a picture of something. I do love that. Like that's great. Like I can find it for you or something similar to it.
You're describing everything I did today walking into here.
You fucked up, dude.
I know.
But I mean that's something that you and I talked about a lot when you were still downstairs. Is like. We want them to just, like, why would you not trust us? Everything on the shelf, we've handpicked. We can tell you everything about every single bottle, well better than your phone can.
Well, sure, and that's part of
what's your taste?
Oh, I mean, that's part of the, for lack of a better term, the filing system that we go through when we're engaging with people, and it comes from all sorts of service, whether it's retail, bartending at an event and stuff like that. It's just like, okay, it's a filtration process. Do you just want to get this to post it that you have it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's where we kind of get Pokemon baseball
in
card
front of a red Ferrari that I rented.
Right, exactly.
Just for the weekend.
It's like,
my boobs out.
We call it,
like,
we refer to whiskey as, bourbon especially, as adult baseball.
I mean, I've gotten in trouble from previous brands from going offline, from deleting social media because I didn't want to hear it anymore. I don't care. And now just being part of that healthy comp, now it's mostly just shit we cook and my dog doing something stupid because it's just my brand is not my
95% of
my brand is not who I am. And I'm sure we all know people in the service industry that they get their job and then that's all they post about it. That's cool. I'm not knocking that. If that's what you want to do, that's your voice, great. It's just not mine.
I'm sick of that dog. By the way.
My first branded gig, they asked me to do a branded page, and I said, okay. If that's going to be the deal, then we're going to have to restructure my pay scale because that wasn't part of my job description. I flexed a little hard at it. I really flexed hard at it.
Do you think, and this is a question for everybody, do you guys think that you identify more when it's that sort of branded page? Because for me, I definitely, one of the things that I really, really like about local stores and local brands is this kind of like almost localized version of their social media, where it's like it's not completely polished. It doesn't have that like.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's been perfected or produced, and that's one of the things that I think that Jake gets right is that
There's a bit of charm
you know,
to it.
yeah, and there's like a lot of Chicago in the background. You know, a lot of these local brands that do their own sort of local stuff. Like a few years ago, the lemonade sherry, not sherry, sorry. Shandies.
Shandy.
The
Oh,
Shandies. Do you remember that? And it was so localized.
The Shandy Man can.
Yeah, the Shandy Man can.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And there was those adverts everywhere, and it really resonated with Chicagoans.
For sure.
And I think that while I understand that at the dawn of social media, there were these massive like corporate brands that were like kind of taking over, but now I look at your stories show up the ones that you watch the most. Mine's are all like these localized, like small, someone cooking or like a quick, like 10-second, like flip video on a reel or something of something that I feel that I'm personally involved in,
Sure.
And I feel like it's going more that way. And do you guys get that impression, or are you still chasing after the sort of the big corporate image brands?
I mean, the imperfection and the charm that comes with that for sure, but also too is like how, from a brand point of view, it's like how are you contributing to a conversation without adding to the noise? You know what I mean? And really kind of cutting through that, and being like, okay, podcasting, for example, is a really good one. That I don't listen to podcasts where people drink and rate whiskeys.
Yeah.
To me, that's extremely strange.
Never an idea here. No.
Agreed, yeah.
Nothing against, it's like playing in a band. Like, good, put your energy out there. It's your right to do that. Don't expect me to support you.
Should we
like
rate
sort of
this
thing,
whiskey really quick though?
Please.
It's
Oh, sure.
It's good.
That's not that good.
This is whiskey I get excited about, not because of what it is, but because I don't know what it is.
Yeah, you and I have. Yeah, we've always kind of done that.
I know everybody,
Yeah.
the new thing is those trophy
Oh,
case whiskeys.
Here, we found it.
We found an answer, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay,
the answer
there it is.
Yeah. I
So
don't think-
I
do we
found
say
this in and around St. Louis.
Please, I'm interested.
Schnucks
Luxco?
is a
Oh.
chain in the greater St. Louis area.
It's Luxco?
It's E.H. Schnucks straight bourbon whiskey.
Yeah.
It was extremely cheap. I didn't find it at a Schnucks.
It doesn't look cheap.
It's an
It
old
doesn't look
bottle.
cheap.
It's
Sexy
It's a premium bottle.
Sexy
that
bottle.
Looks very
Yeah.
expensive.
that is like
Plastic
that's
lid.
got 90s written all over it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It
if
actually
I would
looks,
go as far
it
as
looks like the
90s.
whiskey that Jeff, what was the movie? Wild Horse with Jeff.
You're gonna edit
Bridges?
this out, right?
No. Yeah, Jeff Bridges.
Jeff Bridges?
Was it Wild Horse?
I don't know. I
He was
just
a-
you
he
said
was a
Jeff.
co-
I
he
said
was-
Bridges.
He was a country singer, or maybe it's Wild Heart or something like that.
It is wild. Yep, it is.
Yeah.
I think it is wild.
Yeah,
Heart. Yep.
there's a bottle that he drank on there that I think was a made up label.
I have picked up
I do
this
that in
bottle
movies.
thinking that it was going to be plastic. Like, just
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the way it looked, and when I picked it, I was like, oh my
give
god,
it a
it's
squeeze.
real glass.
It's finding those weird, like you can barely find anything on the internet about this. That's what excites me.
But yeah,
And,
we used to, go dusty picking all the time.
Oh, sure.
But
But ours,
anyhow,
famously, ours was when Evan Williams changed their label.
Silky Boys.
Green label went away. They changed their black label
label's
thing. So
pointless.
they sold their green label, I'm sure, at a loss. And so they took away the green label. They changed their black label. And in our opinion, quality is subjective, of course.
Massive
the quality of the black label was not something that we appreciated as much.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that's what we freak out about.
I only see the green label
it's
at,
like
like,
those old
bars in
Stitzelweller. It's like those old Stitzelweller Michter's 10 that were out there back in the day, and even those old Rip 10 bottles that you could find for $30 15 years ago.
Yep.
It's kind of an extension of that.
A bottled and bond old granddad from 1986.
Sure, I still find those sometimes, which are very like those old school granddads are my favorite.
America.
But that's what excites it, like us.
Those old green label.
I mean,
old
but for some
Fitz-bonded
people, it is
waiters.
finding those allocated whiskeys,
Yeah.
or they get led into this weird little club that we've built around ourselves, which can be alienating sometimes.
Are the small brands just at fault as the big brands for doing that?
Yeah, I want to talk about
Let's
this.
It
small
depends.
brands.
It depends on how you approach it or how you're asked to approach it.
No, I want to get into that with.
Because I would say there's
both of
only
you.
a
Let's do it.
handful of small American whiskey brands that are kind of doing that with their approach
I
to
firmly
selling whiskey.
believe that when everything is special,
And number
nothing
one on
is.
the list is Old Elk Distillery.
Okay, I'm gonna agree with you actually.
Wait, I
No,
missed
I
that.
don't. No, I'm just talking about how there are small brands that have that approach of not allocation, but collection, for lack of a better term,
Sure.
towards the whiskey.
Some of our favorites, though, do this.
Yeah, that's what I'm about to say. I'm like, Pinhook, one of my
Pinhook
favorites.
is the number one. And,
Pinhook.
when
Right.
you said that, I was
Right.
like, there's only one whiskey I'm thinking
And
about.
Sean was very smart in approaching it that way in the marketing. It turns out he had good whiskey too. That also helps.
Yeah.
Old Elk is like that way
Yeah.
as well.
I was actually thinking Old Elk first, but the other thing with Old Elk is you guys did. Can I say you guys?
Sure.
Okay.
They, them.
Are you offended by that?
There's only one person in here, but call me whatever you want.
They did.
Can I call you Dick Lips?
It's the packaging, the presentation.
People drink with their eyes.
Yeah,
They absolutely do.
and it's stellar. And I remember
I drink with my heart.
when I drink with my belly.
If I look at a new bottle on the shelf, I won't be super harsh. I'll always try it.
The price
But, like,
point's gotten
I
pretty
judge
crazy with
packaging
Old
for
Elk.
sure, 100%. Yeah,
You know,
especially
and-
if it's like $100 bottle, and
Well,
like really
yeah.
like this was like 14. Great, I'll pay $14 for that.
When we brought in, it was when Ross switched over from Pernod to Old Elk, and we were like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Just wait." And then he tells us Greg is on, and he brings us some samples, and we're like, "Oh,
That's what you're doing.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a super smart move." And the first pick that we did, I actually did the first one that we did, and it was a bourbon. We've not done one since. I think our newest
bourbon,
one, that's
just a
coming-
regular bourbon.
just a straight bourbon.
Okay, sure.
The one that's coming in soon. There's a fuzz on the side of your glass, and it's bothering me.
There's a fuzz on your microphone. It's been bothering me.
Okay,
Let's all groom each other for a moment here.
That's a Lola hair.
Quick pause for defuzzing.
But we have just a whiskey. I think it's a Tennessee style whiskey that's coming in. That is a single barrel that we just picked. We've
Love
mostly
Tennessee- I
done
love
weeded
Tennessee whiskey.
and
I
rice.
get
I
shit
know
for it
you
all the
do.
time.
I know you do. I know it's your weakness. But that is like our first pick that we brought in. Bottle was different.
It was more square bottle. Yeah.
Label was
Of Old
different.
Elk.
Didn't have that base. Yeah.
Right.
And it was like $55 or something like
Really?
that on the shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like $100 now. And that's over the period of just a few years.
It's, I mean, the challenge of, for one, going to throw it back to Pinhook is what Pinhook has done. And if you're going to do this, you should, is they've serialized the collectability of it. They
Yes.
have different leases, different age statements, stuff like people that have that collection be like, oh, not to get into the Pokemon,
And to your
gotta
point,
catch them all
drinking with
thing.
your eyes too. The packaging.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sexy, very sexy
But
packaging.
people love numbered shit.
They do.
Like
Yep.
if there's only 250 of something, that like, and the number is if the number isn't on and someone's like, oh, there's only 250 of these bottles, and the number isn't on there, people don't care as much.
And it's that handwritten thing sometimes. Our Four Roses this year, our private barrel, it was printed. The like all of the front label was printed on. And there's just something about it because I have this huge collection of Four Roses because of Al and my affinity with him. And I'm like staring; these two just stick out to me. Like
Well, sure.
and I don't know what it is. It's just, it's strictly an aesthetic
It's a change.
thing.
It's a change.
But yeah, they stick out to me, and I'm like, I don't like the printed thing. It doesn't feel like it's a relationship, kind of in a weird way.
It gets lost in that corporate thing as well. If it's written, it feels localized, right?
Sure.
It feels like personalized.
It feels personal.
Yeah, yours. It's yours. This is like for me, you know.
Well, and something we run into too, being a smaller brand, is, and it's slowing down, but everybody's single barrel crazy.
Yeah.
And what
That's
I try
might
to
be
do,
where the small brands come into play more.
obviously, I want to get my brand into people's hands, right? But I also, not so much obviously for warehouse. You guys are pros. You've been doing it forever. But with smaller retailers that are starting to get into that arena, be like, okay, I'm going to manage your expectations about this, or at least try to.
Yeah.
Be like, I can help you sell it, but I'm not going to do your job for you. And just be like, hey, this, you might not have a line around the block for this, but what I can do is let me get with your staff.
Come in.
Here's some samples that you can
Yeah.
taste people out on of your pick, that sort of thing, and really prop them up to succeed. But we can't do our jobs for them. I mean, last year we did 900 single barrels across the country. That's insane.
Don't understand that number.
And that's all that we're hand selling too.
Wait, okay, again, because we're like in talking
There's
about like
10
smaller like
salespeople out there.
craft distilleries.
Yeah.
So wait, is 900 crazy, or is that good or bad?
It varies from brand to brand.
insane.
It depends on the size
In a
of
good
the
way?
brand.
Yes. Like in the
You
best
guys
of
have a single barrel program, right?
Uh-huh.
We were under.
We'll talk about that.
when
We
do like
started
70.
doing the first year.
70?
We did,
Yeah. We only allocate like 70 to the US a year.
And you do.
and we don't have an allocation system. If you want a single barrel, hey, what are you interested in? Obviously, we'll talk pricing.
How
stuff
many
like
markets
that.
you guys in?
We're in all 50 states.
Okay.
All of them.
That helps.
All of them.
That helps.
It definitely helps.
Yeah.
But I shouldn't say we exhausted this conversation over your single barrel program, but we've talked about it quite a bit, and I'm just still astonished every single time when you say 900. Yeah.
I had Chris Blantner slap me across the face one time when I was like, "Hey, think it's real?" And he's like,
I mean,
yes,
he is
you
known
idiot."
for his violent outbursts.
Exactly. He's a very violent man. No, but it's one of the craziest numbers I've heard in a while, even more than how much Saudi Arabia is offering out of or washed up soccer players to come over there and play.
Don't get me started on Henderson, man.
Oh yeah.
What?
See
Oh, I
ya.
knew. It was, I know
What?
it was
Also a
something
Liverpool
other.
fan.
Do you do 37 cases per single barrel? Like what's the size of a single
It
barrel
depends. Everything goes into a 53 or starts in a 53. Once we get into secondary finishing, you get into like cognacs, armagnacs, sherries. Some of those can be 100 gallons. We don't sell partial barrels, so it depends. So
But can you give us like a rough?
Typically, I'd say 30 is about the sweet. 36 packs is about the sweet spot. We have had people buy like an armagnac
You're doing
finish,
math right now?
Yeah, Callum's really
which
good at math.
is
So's my calculator. It's 162,000 bottles
yeah,
across those 900 single barrels.
yeah.
So it's like, what does your standardized range do? So you do 900 single barrels, call it 36 packs. That's 27,000 six packs.
Yep.
So that versus your standardized range, what does it look like?
I mean, compared to that's where the conversation gets a little hairy because we have got our 4 core, which is our bourbon, wheated bourbon, wheat, whiskey, and rye. Then we have our LTOs, which some we release every year, some we just release when we're ready or when it's ready. I haven't seen the numbers in a while. It's about half.
We've bought at least 7 to 8 barrels.
Yeah,
from you guys.
and there's certain things. While we don't have an allocated whiskey list, like things like our wheated bourbon, which everybody wants wheated bourbon barrels now.
That's most of what we've been doing.
Unless you have a great relationship with us, obviously you guys have supported us since Jump Street, and
Yeah, we have
with
a
people that
very
are
good
looking to get
relationship.
involved with us as a brand, like, well, you have to come to Colorado to pick that.
So, is there a critical point? Is there like critical mass where
Yeah,
so
we're-
many barrels are being produced that it's like, first of all, does it become a logistical problem? At some stage,
It's overwhelming.
because you're
Can
doing
be.
every single person gets a personalized bottle. And then my second question would be, do you guys think that is it going to reach a stage where the single barrel for an old elk single barrel loses its value because there's 900 of them out there?
It can, absolutely. I think we're
Each is
kind
tiny and
of.
precious to everyone else on their own special way.
That's a solid
I think-
question. Though.
Good question, though.
I think holistically, as not just, and this isn't old elk, I think holistically as the boom slows down, which it has, I think we're at that critical mass right now. I think we're going to see a big condensation in American whiskey, whether it's brands getting acquired or brands going away, because we are looking down the barrel of a whiskey glut right now. There's a lot of whiskey not being bought and
I
drank.
agree, and going back to the craft brands and the small brands, it coming from owning independent coffee shops, the real goal was to be bought out. Do you think that that's kind of
For your coffee shop?
yeah? It was always like when Stumptown got bought by like some investment bank or something like that. And I've known the owner of that company forever since it
Minneapolis
started.
based?
I don't know if it's
Seattle.
I don't know
Or
if it's
Portland, sorry.
I don't know if it's a goal. I think it's an acceptable outcome in many ways for a lot of people because
In every coffee company I had, my whole plan was eventually I'll be able to sell out, and I didn't care. Like,
Sure, but
I
there's
didn't give a
people
shit.
that start their whatever they're doing out of romance, especially with whiskey. I think where whiskey is inherently romantic.
In America.
it has to wait. It has to
Is it
sit
not in
there,
Scotland?
you know, that sort of thing.
No, my point was purely that
The craze of it.
the American whiskey specifically is where the glut is. You know, there's not a real glut on Australian whiskey, or there's not on Scotch.
No, it's for
you
sure
know?
American
You
whiskey.
haven't-
Yeah,
you
you're
haven't-
right.
You
You're
haven't
right.
been to somewhere.
But
Singapore.
like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think we actually discussed this a long time ago when we first talked about single barrels. We were in it was one of the anniversary podcasts, and we were in Jake's basement, and we
Sure,
talked
we were
about
very sober.
we were extremely sober, and we talked a little bit about how America is going through this thing right now where, you know, not everybody and their dog, but there's a lot of people producing their own whiskies, okay, and whether that's through sourcing or whether they're producing it by themselves. And I think a lot of people are doing the coffee shop, we'll call that the coffee shop mentality, which is where you start off and you want to get bought out. And there are people out there that are doing it purely for romance. You know, I think of someone like Nick Brady Mast, all right, from Dancing Goat. He just adores whiskey, right? And whether or not he...
Breaking news: he sold a company this week.
Oh, never mind, then I'll...
Are you serious?
No.
We all just
I was gonna slap
Wow.
Callum's mic out of his hand.
No, but his Illinois sales rep did text me that as a joke earlier this week.
what
The previous guest on this podcast.
What starts as romances and enthusiasm, if you do anything for 20 years, you'd be like, if somebody backs a dump truck full of
think it's
money
more
up
like-
to your door, you'd be like,
But
I've done this for 20 years, I've had my run.
My point, though, is this, like, you see I don't know if you see those graphs with, like, Apple products and the saturation period, and then
Oh,
it
sure.
cools
Yeah.
off and all
Yeah.
this kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I think that other big countries that have produced whiskey knowingly and have been doing it for, like, a long, long time, and it's been a global phenomenon, like,
Yeah.
you look at Scotch and Irish, they went through this.
Well,
But
yeah.
it was 200 years ago.
Yeah,
250
long time
years
ago, yeah.
you know, in Ireland, there was twice the amount of distilleries in Ireland when Scotch, like before phylloxera and everything like this, before Scotch became the king of the world from the whiskey point of view.
Yep.
And they go through this where everybody's like, oh my God, like, people love getting drunk. I love the taste of this stuff.
Sure.
And at some stage, someone's going to ask to buy this off of me. I'm going to start my own.
Well, you find places to survive.
And I think I don't know enough about American whiskey, but it wouldn't surprise me if we were coming to the edge, the peak of that.
Yeah.
I think
hill,
so.
You know,
It's-
where
it's been about every 25 years in America where every American whiskey since
Crashes,
post
yeah.
World War II, where
Yeah.
it's been
You look at Four
high,
Roses.
fall into the 60s of like martinis, in like the whole Mad Men era, where it's like you could see
That's
it
how
through that program, like start drinking whiskey, more martinis as it goes through, more vodka based. Going to the 80s, nobody wants American bourbon. 90s, distilleries are shutting down.
That's how Four Roses survived.
Right.
They sold most of their product through Japan, France,
that
and
answer was
Spain.
international to
Exactly,
survive.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
don't
think we're at that point of creativity that I don't think
that's
anybody's
where the
really
small brands
anticipating.
come in, I think.
For sure.
Because you guys are, like, I think the smaller craft brands are being a lot more creative with what they're doing.
Sure.
And I also, like, I get what you mean by, like, it's romanticized. I think it's more, like, fetishy anymore
Oh,
with
it's-
American bourbon than it is
It's-
romantic.
The customers are fetishing it, or the owners of the actual distilleries?
The customers.
Okay.
A little bit.
And it is totally, look what I have. And I don't think that people are, we've had this conversation numerous times, we probably have too, drink your whiskey. Don't buy it to display it on your shelf like this prized trophy, like this
Right.
deer that you shot in the woods that you're
Right.
going to get mounted on the
or this
fucking wall.
ale.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Ooh,
Checks
that
in the
was
mail,
pretty
nailed
good.
it.
That was good. That was good.
No, I think I hear you so much on that. There's one of your Aaron picks that I have, the peated one, and you're just like, this is so good, but I don't want to finish it. And I've drank that bottle pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I've had it for like
Sure.
6-7 months and gone through it. Like I'm down to like a few pours left into it.
Minnie gets mad at me constantly of being like, can you finish? Like, can we finish any of these bottles? And I'm like, no, not until the right time, you know? Like, and
The
that's
opportune moment.
I think, more of like romanticizing the
Yeah.
whiskey because you feel like you have a relationship with
Granted-
it. You've opened it.
Yeah, I'm
That-
we're on probably all the unfair people to talk to about it. Like I have a storage unit full of whiskey that I didn't pay for, and it's like my stock of whiskey from work. You know, It's-
That's great. But I think for
is
smaller, whatever, do whatever. I've got 4 feelings left. It's not going to hurt any of them. What I think small brands are needing to realize, and I think a lot of them are, is that you need people out there if you have a story or getting whiskey into people and having that personal touch. You have brands out there that are so popular and their allocated whiskeys are so sought after that it's actually taking jobs away. They don't need salespeople anymore. And to me, that's the kind of ugly side of what I've started to see.
Okay.
I
think
and I'm not going to call anybody out. I would never do that.
No.
But
You're about to.
I think you should.
no, I don't want to. It's not my job to do that.
Before we get into
And that's not the point. The point is, like, let's put whiskey is people based. It's romantic.
Yeah.
If you have a story to sell out there, then you need to have somebody to tell it. Or if you're looking to buy whiskey, build a brand behind it and sell it in a couple years, well, good for you too. I mean, that's fine. Whatever works for you.
It's a great point. Great thing to bring up. I just want to go back to the Old Elk one minute here. Do you think that the single barrel program is injecting life into the brand in a very positive way? Or is it people looking for allocated stuff where it's not bringing it back to the core product?
It's a different market.
Only because it's not just Old Elk doing that. Like, that's how we grew. in
Oh,
America.
didn't take it that way at all. I think it's a different market too, as we're now, this is the first normal calendar year we can honestly say we've had since 2019.
Yeah.
So it's a different market. I think consumers are different. They're drinking less, but they're paying more to do it in, I think, a lot of ways.
I mean, what I would say is, like, Old Elk, it is a brand that if I taste somebody out on it, they buy it.
Yeah.
But if they've not, and they just look at it at the shelf at that price and they don't know what it is at all,
Yeah.
they don't buy it.
It's been a big
Respectable, too.
it's been a big focus of mine too, to focus on premise as well.
Yep.
For one, Chicago had it pretty bad for a few years, so
Yeah.
trying to get the brand in front of people and doing that, our price has has quite a bit to do with it too, because we're not inexpensive. We're not at that dollar an ounce sweet
price for the
spot.
on-premise?
Right.
What is your biggest market, if you don't mind me asking?
Illinois. Illinois, number one.
Really?
If you take away Metro Chicago, the rest of Illinois is number 16.
Isn't that probably every brand?
Missouri's number 6,
That's
though,
fair.
nationwide.
So Colorado's not up there?
It's getting up there. It's Chicago, or Colorado doesn't really have
It's a
the
provincial market.
populace
and there's a lot of great
centric.
distilleries.
It's a different market. It's a different animal.
They're not as, like, more like locally
They
kind
are.
of
But
focused.
I think the problem is there's so many good local brands,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
if that's fair.
yeah.
Well, and so that's a great segue into what you brought up about online. Well, so COVID obviously fucked things up for every single industry in the world, except for, like, GameStop. But
I made my money.
I wanna
off
watch that movie.
I
I'm
made
watching
I made
that
a
movie.
lot of money off GameStop. That
Did
was,
you?
Oh yeah.
You're one of the ones that got.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
No, like my
Ones.
best friend was just like, dude, buy GameStop. I'm like, all right, cool. You're a million times smarter than me.
Yeah.
And I was like,
well, it
he's like, now you sell it. I'm like, okay.
COVID made everybody readjust, obviously, and a lot of things for.
Thank you
brands
for not
like-
saying pivot.
I know. I actually didn't say it just because of you. Just for you, but a lot of brands readjusted on how to sell whiskey because
Sure.
it became single barrel focused, because you could get to those consumers, and it was a good way of introducing the brand. It's not the most typical way. I still don't think it's the best way. I think you should rely on your core product because it's always going to be there versus the single barrels. Single barrels should bring you back to that core product. But as you were speaking about 5 minutes ago about the online presence becoming a way of selling whiskey and taking away jobs from people, yeah, brands are trying that. Guess what? If you don't have somebody sitting in that bar stool every single night from like 3 to 8 p.m. and talking about your brand, it's not going to grow. It's going to it's going to get high quickly off of this like echo chamber, I think, is social media whiskey.
Yeah.
Everyone, it was, Ryan, that dude Ryan on Instagram, and he has a big TikTok following. Really great guy out of Florida. And he posted, like, what barrel should me and my group pick next? And he posted, like, the top 10 responses to it. And it was, like, Penelope, Pinhook, like,
Sure.
all the regulars. And I was like, I texted him. I'm like, hey, man, like, doesn't this just prove that social media is an echo chamber? And he's like, oh,
It is.
there's a few
Yeah.
other ones. I'm like, yeah, but and like the few other brands he said, and this is not to discredit him, he's just posting something.
Right.
It's kind of more about the layout of social media and how some brands have done a really good job marketing and become darlings in social media over the last 3 to 4 years, which is great. Like, we had that moment for a little bit there in the online space because I was in that online space completely perpetuating the brand. It didn't take an automatic algorithm it took people to actually install that.
Okay, that's where you're talking about two different things, though, because you were working for the brand, you were doing it yourself, you were tracking all of that information yourself as well.
My problem with social media, Jake.
My problem with social media is that a large part of what we do is trackability. We look at our numbers every morning. We see how we're doing. What's going on in our markets, whatever is happening. Whereas you start to bring in the social media construct of it, and it becomes extremely untrackable. Which, if it works and it's proven to work, obviously we have those relationships that are anomaly based, that are like, yeah, this person's great with us. They help raise the bar. But some people are looking for other people's wake to ride on a little bit.
Right.
It was not too long ago that somebody tagged. It was one of those like stores that was doing a raffle or an auction that it wasn't Illinois based, but they tagged my brand in a picture that were other brands' allocated whiskeys. Hey, you buy one of these, you get a ticket. And we've talked about this too, and I was like kind of mad about that.
That was me.
It's just like, really, guy? Like, this is what you're doing? Like, yeah, I want to do that, but I also don't like to work Saturdays. Did that for a long time. Like, I don't want to do it again.
So I wanted to kind of get in touch base a little bit more on like the craft brands and the smaller brands, and the fact that you guys are doing a lot more creative things,
Sure.
I think, than the major brands are. But I wanted to ask Callum, actually, how you feel like...
About linen shirts?
Love them. I had a call this morning with my immigration lawyer, so it was like linen on the top.
Oh, I love that.
There you go. It's a good shirt.
Recreation on the bottom.
There you go.
I saw your underwear.
Do you see that happening in like the Scotch and even like the Irish whiskey world?
I mean, obviously, Irish is totally like
Teeling's getting out there with some stuff.
Oh, massively. I went to the Teeling tasting recently over at the Gauge with Rob Caldwell, and it was just like
he's going to be here like this upcoming weekend.
Blew my mind.
Coming on the podcast very soon.
The Chinkapaw series and everything, like they're doing like super cool stuff. I think the big difference between Irish and Scotch is obviously the use of wood. Like obviously Scotch is completely restricted to oak, and again,
But they finish. I mean, Patterson does all sorts of crazy stuff with Dalmore.
And I think this is the thing though, is that like in America, especially, it's a completely different ball game with American whiskies. And the reason I asked you about the biggest state or the biggest consumer of Old Elk is that, like if you look at Illinois is like 2-3 times as big as Scotland. So, like the population of Illinois, I think maybe, I don't know, is it 10 million maybe around there?
It's 8, yeah.
Yeah, so like Scotland, there's like 4.5-5 million people in the whole country.
How many deer though?
Bazillion.
12 trees.
And that's 10% of the sheep. But we can't, like the craft idea or the small local distillery idea in Scotland plays out so differently than it does here.
Do you think it's tradition?
I think it's partly that. Like obviously you have to wait 3 years before all that kind of stuff, and it's it's tough. Like with the sourcing aspect here with MGP and everything, there's so much more whiskey available.
Sure.
But I also think any small, like you take like a King's Barnes, right, distillery, right, in Fife, really really great distillery, some great whiskey, but it's nigh impossible for them to get off the ground in America because with everything that's going on, like you said, there's a whiskey glut, and whether you're a single malt or not, it kind of inflates into your like numbers and your sort of overall sphere. I don't think moving forward that we're going to see a lot of like small craft distilleries in Scotland doing particularly special things at an international level. However, I think we will see that at a localized level in Scotland.
For sure.
But it's on the same scale as America. It's the same idea as America, but on a much smaller scale.
Do you think that American single malt, like there's been a rise on American single malt? Do you think that that's affecting Scotch? Like
as crazy as it sounds, I think that no, and I think that the reason for it is that I don't think single malt is a category. I think Scotch has its own category, but it kind of shares it with Irish.
Sure.
They kind of, especially now with the single pot still stuff.
Yeah.
I think like American single malt, which like we actually have done a couple of tastings on American. I'm obsessed, right? I think they're-
Really?
There's some really good ones out there.
Yeah.
What are your favorites? Actually, I'm
well,
curious.
when we had Kyle Smith on,
Yep.
and the stout cast with Westward was particularly impressive. You
Yeah.
know, I really like their stuff.
Yep.
I just think that it's not as known out there, and I think the reason that I say that I think single malt is in its own category. Is that you look at Starward, I don't think anyone would put, even though Starward has a bunch of its own single malts.
What is Starward?
Great
It
question.
was a trilogy of films that was released in the 70s. No, I think no one would put it in the same category as like a Balvenie or a Macallan or a Glenlivet.
Do you think
it's a
American?
different beast.
Do you think
Yeah.
American single malt is more appealing to like the American craft consumer? Do you think it's taking away from?
I think it's more appealing. I think anything that's localized American craft
Sure.
is
I think-
always going to be more
I
appealing
think
to
it's
Americans.
I think it's more about what are you buying in front of you that's local to where you are at, because we've talked about it a lot too, and I think some American distilleries would admit this, that they released their single malts too early and did a disservice to themselves because the flavor profile was not there.
You could put a bourbon and rye were the same way. They just did it 10,
It's
15 years ago.
Laws-
It was the same thing.
Yeah.
Laws is in Colorado, right?
Yep.
What's that?
Yeah.
Laws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you guys like kind of like?
We actually do an
Just did a
experimental.
collaboration, right?
Yeah, we do an experimental wheat whiskey every year with
Oh,
all
cool.
the Colorado distillers.
It's
That one's
you, Woody
amazing.
Creek.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Laws. I want to say Breckenridge.
I got a taste of it. It was delicious.
Stranahan's might be involved. I forget.
that was
I would
another
be-
one that I was going to mention. Stranahan's.
I wasn't going to say anything about Stranahan's.
They like I think
But look at
these-
St. George. Been doing this for 4 decades.
And so, yeah, I think, overall, I think the two categories are very different. And to answer the original question, I don't think that any craft Scotch distilleries are going to, because you were saying, we were talking about this earlier, like 27,000 six-packs, right? And Jake was like, oh my God, like that's a bunch of whiskey, you
Yeah,
know?
cheap in erection.
Like
Yeah.
the Scotches, when you look at Scotch, Johnny Walker's at 20 million 9-litre cases
Right.
across the world, right?
I was going to say not. I don't think
Not in the US. Not in the
Yeah.
US. I mean, it's very, very small. I mean, compared to that, it's very, very small in the US. But so as
Is
like
India the best market for it?
yeah, well, Asia in general. So a lot in China, a lot in India.
I didn't want to say it. I'm glad.
No,
you
no,
said
no.
That would
actually,
that would
the
actually be
numbers-
something interesting to talk about. Is
We got 3 minutes.
No, okay.
I gotta leave it.
No, maybe not.
3
Maybe
minutes.
not a conversation for today. But you look at Johnny Walker as an example of like it being obviously the most popular blended Scotch in the world, and up there, got to be the most popular whiskey, I would imagine. You look at what's happened in American whiskey and how much MGP/Greg Metz has been responsible for. How many times do you say, "Oh, that's MGP rye"?
We used to all
And,
talk
like,
shit
getting-
on, oh, it's MGP. Oh,
Sure,
it's
I
MGP.
remember when it was
Now
happening.
It's so sought after.
I actually got
That's
in
a whole
trouble.
episode we should just save.
Dying.
It was actually at the Independent Spirits Expo years ago that
Really?
Chuck Cowdery was
You didn't know
doing
that?
What's
Well,
that?
I mean, I know it's sought after, but I wouldn't expect it to be said in those circles.
Oh,
you
dude,
know?
it's the perfect example of what happened with Traverse City.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like I still get confronted by people about that episode.
Really?
You guys joke, but
No, I'm dead serious.
people have picked fights with this guy.
It was the MGP witch hunt back in the day, and now it'd be an interesting conversation to maybe research first. But
Yeah.
what distilling contracts actually look like as whiskey producers and sourcing?
Good luck even giving that up.
yeah.
It's a cool thought exercise.
Transparency
though.
is
I-
such a
you know, that-
transparent
no, no, no.
issue.
I'm a very good friend with not my distillery, but a distillery does contract distilling.
Sure.
We might be doing some work together, and he's not going to tell me that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, only because it's a soft spot.
Any distillers out there?
Yeah.
We're looking for your contracts.
Oh, fourth
You know,
wall,
actually,
fourth
so
wall.
actually, here's a really good. Here's interesting.
Very Deadpool
interviewing-
move.
I'm interviewing Buzzard Roost next week, and
Okay.
they're MGP contracted, but they are. I think this is out there. They're going to start using Bardstown as
Sure.
That's actually
they're
been happening quite a bit recently.
because they've been housing their barrels there anyway.
That's
Yeah.
what Bardstown
So-
built their cornerstone on. Same thing with Wilderness Trail. They got acquired because of their
Yeah.
distilling capabilities and futures. Not necessarily part of the brand. I mean, the brand is
101. Okay, we got 5 minutes.
Obviously, the brand that
we just got
Wilderness
4 minutes
Trail
back.
built was a huge asset and probably why the sale actually happened. But they got purchased. Forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, but it's my understanding that they got purchased because of their distilling and storage capabilities and
yeah.
futures, so whiskey futures.
Have you been there?
I have not.
It's an amazing.
I don't go to
facility.
distilleries. Everybody asks, like, if I'm going through,
The thing about
you got to stop
Bardstown
here.
is
I'm
when
like,
you
no,
go
it feels like
down
work.
there. We went down, Minnie and Manny and I, and I've already told these guys this. We went down to do a Blanton's pick for a recess. And
You wearing steel-toed boots with that name drop?
you
Wow, this guy. What color were your laces?
Blanton's red. No, I shouldn't say that. Edit that out. But you drive
For
by
recess?
Bardstown. It's off the highway.
Yeah.
It's like in this location. Like it looks like it could be an outlet mall or something. It's
Okay.
huge.
Sure,
It's
sure.
insane.
And that's the way they wanted to go. That was their business projection.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's beautiful.
I have never met.
I
a
lost. I
single
got my
person.
keys locked in my car there. So yeah.
Well,
There you go.
one thing that
Everybody I've met from there are great.
Yeah.
One thing to talk a little briefly on the distillery point is, a lot of these distilleries now are going the same way that Macallan went, with the big Teletubbies factory that they built in the north of Scotland. We went to Journeyman, it's probably a year and a half ago now.
Yeah.
Year
How
and a
was
half
that
ago.
experience?
Shout out to
Oh, I
Bill
love-
Welter.
I love Journeyman, yeah.
The Welters.
All those guys.
My-
But the main thing that was really highlighted to me was when we went into the distillery, and like not only are they investing a lot of money in the whiskey and the process and the wood that they're bringing in, but they were building another half, like they were building like what they already have onto the back of their distillery.
Sure.
And it was becoming
Got
like
a
this
facility
whole
in Valparaiso.
It becomes
That's
this
opening
whole
soon, I think.
experience.
Yeah. Sure.
It's like this whole experiential
That's
thing.
something too. Is I'm wondering how much craft whiskey or smaller whiskey brands are going to end up reflecting what happened in craft beer over the last 10 years, and that being
that's a whole can
Craft
of
beer
worms.
is, craft
that
beer is
we-
like dead,
yeah.
basically.
kind of. It's just the ability to fill the national pipeline
Well,
is
like-
almost an impossible thing at this point. if
Too
you're
hard.
just
Too
starting.
hearted. I mean, their whole thing is now you can crack open like a 3 blah 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 hazy this and that, or you can go back to the original craft beer. It's like that's where we come full circle to it.
I would rather.
Well,
go
sure.
back to
Line
beer-flavored
extensions. Line extension into
What's wrong with
obliv-
High Life, guys?
First of
Nothing,
all,
absolutely
first of all, we
nothing.
need to engage this conversation, but we should also have somebody who's in the brewing industry with this conversation because
Yes.
it is super important to have because as we were texting about earlier this week, what happened with Anchor last week, and Matt and I briefly talked about it. Like
I
it's-
have that meme of Homer Simpson standing in front of the banner saying, "Let somebody else do it," because you have all these people that are like,
Yeah.
"We got to save this, we got to," and I get that, but like, when was the last time you bought an Anchor? I mean, I had one a few weeks ago
We
at
used
my
to
local,
have
but that's about
people
it.
lined on the block for local brewery releases.
sure,
Right.
for sure.
Just like when we have a single barrel that we actually publicize.
Sure.
And no, never.
Now
Well,
that-
and then you
now
have
that-
the provenance of people wanting to drink local, which I completely subscribe to. Is I know Michael Roper has talked about this quite a bit on other podcasts. Is that all these breweries open in his backyard, and they were keeping their limited release stuff at their brewery, and he was getting mad about that. Being like, "Well, I helped build your brand, and now that you have your own, they call it own premise, to where you can serve and sell and stuff like that." I'm hoping that
Pliny the Elder and all that did the same thing.
yeah, and it's just like I'm hoping that permeates into smaller brands. Like, yeah, open up your own facility. I know millennials got pigeonholed for enjoying the experience more than anybody else did.
Talking
But
shit.
if you're leaving the house to spend something,
What did you say about millennials?
no, but if you leave your house to do something that's experientially driven, whether it's walking into warehouse or
Yeah, that's true.
going to sit at a local whiskey bar or brewery or whatever.
Great point. We're going to end the conversation there because I have to go to a meeting. But
Is that an AA meeting?
yes.
Okay.
See, small brands work on Fridays too.
Non-alcoholic.
That's the thing that should be brought up. Small brands still have to work on Fridays.
The one thing I'll say, I mean, this is interesting because it was a new concept of us all just like bantering around the table together, or bar, I guess as it is. My job's so much easier than your guys'.
I had a retailer, not mentioned, but like, do you want to come just like be the whiskey purveyor of my place? I'm like, as much as I would, can you offer me this number? Slid it across the table.
Yep.
He's like, enjoy your job.
That's actually one of the first conversations I had with Gene. Pandemic hit. I worked here. Had the opportunity to work here, and was very fortunate to do so. But
That was from Miller, right?
Yeah, through Miller. I'm like, okay, my name came up, and I mean, not to do one of these, but like my name came up with Mike Miller and Gene. It was.
Did you wear steel toe boots with that name drop?
It was no, it
Oh!
was. I was in a very dark place, and it was a ray of sunshine.
And Miller has wanted to get rid
But
of
with
it.
a ray of
Gene,
sunshine's a good place to
Gene,
end.
because he had a great staff and always does. He started talking about all these things. I'm like, okay, just so you know, this is the number I need to be at
Yeah.
to get back to pre-pandemic income for me. And it was challenging, but it's Gene. Gene
good
loves
to have
challenging
friends. Yeah,
conversations,
it's good to have friends.
and I think he appreciated my honesty because it's Gene.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for this conversation. I think there is like another 3 hours in this, so
Just on one of those topics.
right. If you're a fan of the podcast, we're gonna try to do this once a month and have a little roundtable discussion from all insights of the industry. I hope you enjoyed it. Zach, thank you for hosting us. Callum,
you.
thank you for showing up late, looking great in that shirt. Thank you for inspiring me, Eric. To
Look at that shirt. He's laid back. He's going to be late.
I love that shirt.
It is a good shirt. It's a very good shirt.
Eric, thank you, obviously, for just all you do and working for a great distillery.
Nice T-shirt.
Ciao, guys.
Everyone, enjoy your weekend. Go to Lincoln Avenue Festival and drink at the Whiskey Fest. Are you doing it?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Cheers.